chosen ones. You almost said the name out loud, and then something in you just stopped. Like you weren't supposed to finish it yet, and now it's sitting there, unfinished but louder than before. Wait. Don't rush past that feeling, because that hesitation wasn't random. It was placed there. There's a reason Jay keeps circling back into your awareness in ways that don't make sense at first. Not obvious, not loud, just repeated in strange timing. You thought it was coincidence, then you ignored it. Then it showed up again, slightly different, but enough to make you pause. Why now? That's the part you weren't asking, because if you really look at the timing, it didn't start recently. It started when things in your life began shifting quietly, when certain doors didn't open, when certain people didn't stay, when something just felt slightly off, but you couldn't explain it. And somehow, Jay was there. Not clearly, but present. That's not random. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. You weren't supposed to understand it earlier. You weren't ready to. Not because you weren't capable, but because if you had seen it too soon, you would have made a decision that would have pulled you completely off your path. Yeah, I said it. Something was delayed on purpose, and part of you knows exactly what I'm talking about, even if you can't fully explain it yet. Think about it. Why did certain things fall apart right before they were about to become something real? Why did something feel right, but still not happen? You told yourself it just wasn't meant to be. But what if that wasn't the full truth? What if it was meant, just not in the way you expected? This is where most people scroll away, because this part doesn't feel comfortable. But you didn't scroll, so let's go deeper. Jay isn't just a person or a moment or a memory. It's a marker, a signal point, something that was placed in your timeline to trigger awareness, not attachment. And that's where you almost got pulled in. You started assigning meaning too early. You tried to connect dots that weren't ready to be connected. And that created confusion. Not because you were wrong, but because you were ahead of the timing. There's a difference. You felt something real, yes. But what you did with that feeling almost redirected you somewhere you weren't supposed to go yet. Read that again, slowly. This wasn't about losing something. It was about being kept from something too early. And that's why it feels unresolved, because it is, but not in the way you think. You keep trying to close a loop that was never meant to close at that point in your life. And every time you revisit it, something in you tightens, like you're close to understanding, but not quite there. That tension. That's the signal, not the situation itself. You've been focusing on the wrong layer. And yeah, this is where I'm going to say something that might not sit right immediately. You gave too much power to what Jay represented. Not intentionally, not consciously, but you did. You made it bigger than it was supposed to be at that stage. And that's exactly why it had to be pulled back. Not taken from you, just paused. Because if it continued the way it was going, you would have built something on a version of yourself that wasn't fully aligned yet. And that never lasts. Ever noticed how everything that almost worked didn't? Not fully. There was always something slightly off. A delay, a misalignment, a moment that didn't click the way it should have. That wasn't bad luck. That was protection. That protection doesn't always feel good when you're inside it. Sometimes it feels like confusion, like missed chances, like something slipping through your hands. But now something is shifting. You're not in the same place you were when Jay first appeared in your awareness. You've changed, even if it was quiet, even if you didn't notice it happening. And now the meaning of Jay is changing too. This is the part most people miss. They think the sign was about the moment. It wasn't. It was about the transformation it was triggering inside you, and you're just now starting to see it. Not fully, but enough to feel like, wait, this wasn't what I thought it was, exactly. And here's the shift you didn't expect. J was never the destination, it was the interruption, the redirection, the moment that quietly pulled you off a path you thought you wanted and placed you onto something you didn't fully understand yet. And yeah, part of you is still holding on to the old interpretation. That's normal, but it's also the reason you felt stuck in that loop, because you're trying to move forward while still looking back at something that was never meant to be permanent in the way you imagined. That doesn't mean it didn't matter. It mattered a lot, just not for the reason you told yourself. And now you're at this strange point where things are starting to make a little more sense, but also raising new questions. Like, if that wasn't what I thought it was, then what is coming next? That question right there, that's where everything changes, because now you're no longer reacting to the past. You're starting to align with what's ahead. And the truth is, you weren't ignored. You weren't rejected. You weren't too late. You were being repositioned. Quietly. Precisely. In a way you couldn't have controlled even if you tried. And that unfinished feeling you still carry about Jay, it's not a mistake. It's a reminder that something bigger was happening, even when it didn't look like it. And you're only now beginning to step into the version of yourself that can actually understand why. It's strange how something you once questioned is now starting to feel like it was guiding you. If this is hitting something real inside you. Comment, I was mean to see this. Stay connected to Born into Light. You're understanding this for a reason, and that's where it gets strange. Because the more you step into that version, the less Jay feels like something you lost, and the more it starts to feel like something that redirected you at the exact edge of a wrong turn. Not a big, obvious mistake, something subtle, something that would have looked right on the outside, but slowly drained something from you over time. You wouldn't have noticed it at first. That's the part that doesn't sit well, because a part of you still wants to believe it could have worked if things were just slightly different. But would it have, or were you only seeing a version of it that matched where you were back then? There's a difference, and you're starting to feel that difference now, even if you haven't put it into words yet. Look at how you respond to it today. It doesn't hit the same. Not fully. Not in the way it once did. That shift isn't random. It means something in you moved forward, even while part of your mind stayed behind trying to make sense of it. That split feeling, that's been the real tension this whole time. Not Jay itself. You. Between who you were when it appeared and who you're becoming now. And here's where most people get this completely wrong. They think clarity comes first, and then peace follows. It doesn't. Peace comes in fragments, confusing ones. Moments where something just doesn't feel as heavy as it used to, and you don't even know why. Those are the real signals, not the obvious answers, not the clear explanations you've been waiting for. Because if everything was explained too cleanly, you'd try to control it again, and that would put you right back where you were. So instead, it's unfolding like this. Layer by layer. A little uncomfortable, a little incomplete. Just enough for you to feel it, but not enough to force it. And yeah, I'm going to say something that might interrupt everything you thought you were starting to understand. What if Jay never needed to come back into your life in the way you expected for its purpose to be fulfilled? Sit with that, because that question alone starts shifting everything. It means the value wasn't in the continuation, it was in the interruption, and you've been measuring it by the wrong outcome this whole time. That's why it never made sense. That's why it kept looping in your mind without closure. Because you were trying to finish something that was never designed to be completed like that. And now you're getting closer to the part where the meaning flips, where it stops feeling like something unresolved and starts feeling like something that protected a version of you that couldn't see clearly yet. But here's the part that's still just slightly out of reach. Why does it still come back into your awareness even now? Not as strong, not as emotional, but still there, still present. That's not random either. And you already know that. You just haven't let yourself follow that thought all the way through yet. Because if you do, it changes how you see not just Jay, but everything that came after it. And maybe that's what this has really been preparing you for. But preparation for what? That's the part you keep circling without landing on. Because every time you get close to answering it, something in you hesitates again, the same way you hesitates again. The same way you hesitated before saying that name. It's the same pattern. Not fear, not doubt. Recognition, like you're approaching something that's already decided and you're just now catching up to it. Strange, right? Because it almost feels like the outcome was set before you fully understood the situation, which doesn't make sense unless no. See, that's where your mind tries to step in and organize it. But this isn't something you figure out by organizing it. It's something you notice when you stop trying to control where it's going. And you haven't fully stopped yet. Be honest, there's still a part of you trying to predict what J means for your future, trying to assign it a role, a return, an ending, something. But what if the reason it still shows up isn't to tell you what's coming next, it's to show you what you've already moved past? Feel that shift, because that changes everything. It means the signal isn't forward-facing. It's reflective, a quiet comparison between who you were when it first appeared and who you are now when it crosses your mind again. And every time it reappears, it's asking something without words. Do you still see it the same way? And your answer has been slowly changing. You just didn't notice it happening in real time. That's why it felt confusing, because the meaning wasn't fixed. You were. Back then, now you're not. And that's where the tension starts to break, but not completely, because there's still one piece you haven't fully faced yet. What if the reason it never fully left your awareness is because it's tied to a moment that hasn't happened yet? Yeah, that doesn't sit cleanly, does it? It almost contradicts everything you were starting to accept. Good, that's the point, because this isn't linear. It never was. You've been trying to place it in a past, present, future sequence, but it doesn't belong to just one of those. It overlaps. And you felt that. Moments where something from back then suddenly feels relevant again, but not in the same emotional way. More neutral, clearer, like you're seeing it from above instead of inside it. That perspective shift, that's new, and it didn't happen by accident. So ask yourself this: if Jay was only about the past, why does it feel different now instead of fading away? And if it was only about the future, why did it show up before you were ready to understand it? Exactly. It doesn't fit cleanly into either, because it was never meant to. It was placed at a point where your path bends, not where it ends. And you're standing right near that bend now, closer than you think. That's why things feel slightly unstable. Not wrong, just not settled yet. Like something is about to click into place but hasn't fully locked in. And here's the part you might not expect: you don't actually need the full explanation for it to happen. In fact, getting the full explanation too early would slow it down. You'd question it, overthink it, try to control it again. So instead, you're being brought to the edge of understanding. Just the edge. Enough to feel the shift, but not enough to interfere with it. And that's exactly where you are right now. Right on that edge, where things don't fully make sense, but somehow feel more true than when they did. And that quiet truth, it's starting to press a little harder now, isn't it? Not loud, not overwhelming, just harder to ignore, because something in you has stopped resisting it the way you used to. You're not fighting for the old explanation anymore. You're watching it fall apart, almost calmly. And that's new. That's the shift you didn't announce to yourself. It just happened. But here's where it deepens, that calm you feel right now. It's not closure. That's the mistake your mind is about to make. It's not the end of something. It's the moment before something redefines itself. Subtle difference, but everything changes because of it. Because if this were closure, J would feel finished, distant, flat, but it doesn't. It feels quieter, yes, but also closer in a different way, less emotional, more precise. Like it's no longer pulling at your feelings, it's aligning something deeper. And that should make you pause, because things that lose emotional intensity but gain clarity, they don't disappear, they transform their role. So ask yourself this honestly. Why does it feel like you're not supposed to react to it anymore, but you are supposed to understand it? That distinction didn't exist before. Before, it pulled you in. Now, it holds you still. That's not random. That's progression. But progression toward what? You see how that question keeps returning? It's not leaving for a reason. Because the answer isn't something you're going to figure out. It's something you're about to recognize. There's a difference. One requires effort. The other requires readiness. And you're closer to readiness than you think. But here's the part that interrupts everything. What if the moment you've been unconsciously waiting for has already started, and you didn't notice it because it didn't look the way you expected? Yeah, that changes the feeling, doesn't it? Because now it's not about something coming later. It's about something already unfolding quietly around you. And suddenly, J doesn't feel like a past signal or a future clue. It feels like a reference point, a fixed coordinate, while everything else begins to move. And that movement, you've been sensing it. In small ways, a shift in how you respond, a shift in what you tolerate, a shift in what no longer feels aligned, even if it once did. Those aren't random changes, they're positioning you exactly where you need to be to see what this actually was. Not what you thought it was, not what you hoped it was, what it actually was. And you're almost there, almost at the point where the meaning stops feeling fragmented and starts locking together in a way that feels inevitable. But not yet, because there's still one layer you haven't fully stepped into, and it's the one you've been avoiding without realizing it. It's not about J anymore. That's the part you're starting to sense but haven't fully accepted. J was just the doorway, and you've been standing in that doorway trying to understand the door, instead of looking at what it opened into. Why haven't you fully turned around yet? Because something in you still thinks there's one more answer behind you. Just one final piece you missed, one detail you didn't see clearly enough. And if you could just look at it the right way this time, maybe it would all settle. But it won't. That's the part you're starting to feel, even if you haven't said it out loud. There's nothing back there that will complete this for you, nothing new, only the same loop, waiting for you to step out of it. And you're closer than you think. You've already loosened your grip on it. You just haven't released it completely. Why? Because letting go of the question means accepting that the answer isn't where you were told it would be. And that's uncomfortable, because it forces a different kind of awareness, one that doesn't rely on revisiting, but on moving forward without full confirmation. That's where you are right now, right at that edge again. Same feeling, different level. But here's what's shifting underneath all of this. You're no longer trying to fix the past. You're starting to read it, like it was written for you, not against you, and that changes how everything connects. Because now, instead of asking why did that happen, you're starting to feel what did that position me for? That question, that's new. And it didn't come from overthinking, it came from alignment. Quiet, subtle, almost unnoticeable until it was already there. And now, something ahead of you is beginning to feel more real than what's behind you, not clearer, just heavier in a different way, like it's pulling you without force. Have you noticed that? That quiet pull? It's not urgent, it's not loud, but it's consistent. And it didn't exist before in the same way. That's because you weren't ready to feel it before. You were still turned the other way, still trying to extract meaning from something that had already given you everything it was meant to. And now you're almost fully facing forward. Almost. But there's still that slight hesitation, that instinct to glance back one more time, just in case. Just in case there was something unfinished. But listen closely. What feels unfinished isn't behind you. That's the shift. It only feels that way because you haven't fully stepped into what's opening in front of you yet. Once you do, that sense of unfinished starts to dissolve on its own. Not because you solved it, but because you outgrew the need to. And here's the part that might catch you off guard. You were never meant to get a clean, satisfying answer about Jay. Not the kind you were expecting. Because if you did, you would have stayed attached to it in a way that would have slowed everything else down. So instead, you were given something incomplete, something that couldn't fully close, so it wouldn't fully hold you. That wasn't confusion, that was design. And now, you're starting to feel what happens when something no longer holds you the same way. It doesn't disappear, it just loses its ability to pull you backward. And that space it leaves behind, that's where something else begins to form. Something you haven't fully seen yet, but you've already started moving toward it, without realizing it. Step by step, choice by choice, and now you're at that point where it's about to become visible enough that you won't be able to unsee it anymore. But when it does, you're going to understand something that doesn't fully explain itself, and somehow still makes more sense than everything you've been trying to figure out. And when that happens, you're not going to feel excitement first. That's the part nobody expects. It won't hit like relief. It won't feel like victory. It'll feel quiet. Almost too quiet. Like something inside you just settles without asking permission. And for a second you might question it. Is that it? Yeah. That moment right there, that's where the shift locks in. Not with noise, not with confirmation, with certainty that doesn't need to explain itself. And that's when you'll realize something you've been avoiding this entire time. You were never actually waiting for Jay. You were waiting to become someone who no longer needed to wait at all. Let that land, because it changes the direction of everything. It means the delay, the confusion, the almost, they weren't stretching time. They were shaping you. And not in a gentle way either. Some of it was uncomfortable on purpose. Some of it felt like things slipping just when they were about to align. But now you can see it differently, not clearly, but differently enough to stop chasing what already served its role. And here's the part that flips the entire perspective. What if nothing was taken from you because nothing that was meant to stay ever actually left? Sit with that. Because that thought doesn't settle easily. It challenges everything you labeled as loss. It questions every moment you thought something slipped away. And if that's true, then what you've been calling unfinished was never incomplete, just misread. At the time, from the level you were at. But now, you're not at that level anymore. And you can feel that in how you pause, in how you respond, in how certain things don't pull you the same way they used to. That's not distance, that's elevation. But elevation comes with something most people don't talk about. A moment where everything feels almost too still, like you've stepped out of something, but haven't fully stepped into the next thing yet. That space, that's where you are, right there. And it can feel uncertain if you don't recognize it, because your mind wants movement, clear direction, immediate answers. But this isn't that kind of moment. This is the kind that asks you to stay without reaching back and without rushing forward. And yeah, that's uncomfortable, because it requires something different from you. Not action, trust, and not the kind you say out loud. The kind you show by not interfering with what's already unfolding. But here's the contradiction you didn't expect. Doing nothing here is actually the most precise move you can make, because anything forced right now would come from the version of you that was still trying to control the outcome. And you're not there anymore. Even if part of you still tries to go back to it sometimes, that's fading. Slowly, And as it fades, something else becomes clearer. Not fully visible, but defined enough to feel real, like a path that wasn't obvious before but now feels inevitable. And when you finally step fully into it, you're going to look back at J, not with questions, not with attachment, but with a kind of understanding that doesn't need closure, because it was never about closure to begin with. It was about recognition, but not the kind you force, the kind that arrives when you stop trying to name it. And you're right at that edge now. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle shift where your questions are getting quieter, but your awareness is getting sharper. That's not confusion fading. That's something aligning, slowly. And here's what you haven't fully admitted yet. You don't actually need to go back anymore. Not even a little. That urge, the one that kept pulling your attention backward, it's losing its grip. Not because you pushed it away, but because it no longer fits who you're becoming. That's the part that feels strange, because you didn't force this change. You didn't decide it one day, it just happened. Quietly, while you were trying to figure everything out. And now you're standing in a version of yourself that sees things without needing to chase them. That's new, but don't rush past it. Because this is where the final shift begins to show itself, not outside, inside the way you interpret everything. Even now, the way you're hearing this, it's different than it would have been before. You're not reacting the same way. You're not searching for the same kind of answers. You're recognizing something that doesn't need proof. And that's exactly why it's real. But here's the part that might catch you off guard. One last time, what you've been calling a sign was never meant to guide your next step directly. It was meant to change how you see every step after it. That's why it stayed with you. Not to lead you somewhere specific, but to shift the way you move altogether. And now you move differently, even if you haven't fully noticed it yet. Even if you can't explain it. You hesitate less in the wrong places and pause more in the right ones. That's not random, that's precision. And it came from everything you thought didn't make sense. So no, nothing was wasted. Not the confusion, not the delay, not even that unfinished feeling that followed you for so long. It all had a function, a quiet one that didn't need your approval to work. And now you're seeing the result of it. Not as an answer, but as a state, a way of being that doesn't need to chase clarity because it's already aligned with it. And this is where it settles, not loudly, not dramatically, just into a kind of knowing that doesn't ask for anything else. No more loops, no more reaching back, just forward, without urgency, without resistance, without needing to understand every step before you take it. And that's when it finally becomes clear, not all at once, but enough that what once felt like a mystery now feels like something that was always guiding you, even when you couldn't see it. Now you see it was never random, it was shaping who you're becoming. Subscribe and stay on this path, because you're not just watching this, you're stepping into it.